Hello and welcome to Hollywood at Home from Arizona Public Media. I'm Victoria Lucas. Tonight, we are proud to present Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman in one of the most popular and enduring films ever made, Casablanca, described by the New York Times as a picture that makes the spine tingle and the heart take a leap. Joining Bogart and Bergman is a superb cast of supporting character actors, including Paul Henreid, Claude Rains, Peter Lorre, and Sidney Greenstreet. Even 80 years after its release, people who have never seen the movie can quote many of its lines of dialogue. And while Bogart never said, "Play it again, Sam," well, not in those exact words, he most certainly did say, "Here's looking at you, kid." Besides the sterling cast and memorable dialogue, Casablanca is all the more riveting because it's not a historical retrospective film like Saving Private Ryan. It was filmed in early 1942, when World War II was raging across Europe and North Africa, where the real Casablanca is located. The Allies were suffering significant losses as they were outnumbered and outgunned. No one knew when or how the war was going to end. So as bad news from the front poured in during the film's pre-production, script rewrites increasingly emphasized themes of duty, honor, and standing up against tyranny. Casablanca was produced by Hal Wallis and directed by Hungarian-born Michael Curtiz, already a veteran of more than 60 Hollywood films, plus many more in Europe prior to his moving to the US in 1926. And while his name is now almost universally pronounced Curtiz, he pronounced it Curtiz as it was pronounced in his native Hungary. And I know how he pronounced it because he was my grandfather. So let's talk about casting. Hollywood legend has it that Ronald Reagan and George Raft both turned down the starring role of Rick Blaine. My grandfather always found this highly amusing because the truth was that the script was developed specifically for Humphrey Bogart almost from day one. Yes, Reagan and Raft were under studio contract at Warner's, so of course they'd be on all casting lists as possible leading men for any film at the studio. But for Casablanca, it was Bogart all the way. In fact, I have a copy of an early memo from producer Hal Wallis to studio chief Jack Warner that states, verbatim, "Bogart is ideal for it, and it is being written for him." Besides which, the studio was eager to give Bogart the chance to become a romantic leading man instead of just another tough guy. And boy, was he right for the part. Casting the role of Ilsa, on the other hand, was a different story. The script was not written for Ingrid Bergman. In fact, the character was originally conceived as being American, and actress Anne Sheridan, also a Warner's contract player, tested for the role. But then the studio decided to change the story and make the character European. Hedy Lamarr was their first choice for Ilsa, and wouldn't she have changed the dynamic with Bogart? But Lamarr was under contract to MGM, who refused to loan her out. So Hal Wallis turned his attention to Ingrid Bergman, whose work on Intermezzo had impressed him and audiences alike. She, too, was under contract to MGM, but this time the studio agreed to a loan-out deal. Bergman came aboard for a fee of $25,000, and the rest is history. For supporting roles, both Wallis and Curtiz felt it was important to cast top-flight former European actors for authenticity, rather than relying on American-born actors speaking with accents. For instance, Austrian native Paul Henried, who plays Bergman's resistance fighter husband, had some Jewish ancestry and had been forced to leave his acting career, his bank accounts, his furniture, all his belongings as he escaped the Nazis. Conrad Veidt, who plays the sinister German Major Strasse, had been a big star in Germany before fleeing with his Jewish wife in 1933. And Helmut Dantine, the young husband desperate to get himself and his wife to safety, had been a 19-year-old anti-Nazi youth leader in his native Austria before being rounded up and imprisoned in a concentration camp where only the help of a sympathetic doctor was able to get him out, after which he departed immediately for America. In addition, many of the actors in the smaller supporting roles and the extras in Rick's Cafe had been successful actors in their own countries before fleeing the Nazis. Dan Seymour, the American character actor hired to play the doorman at Rick's, remembered being on the set for the famous scene where the French national anthem, the Marseillaise, is sung to drown out the German soldiers. He said, "I noticed that many of the actors and extras were actually crying, and I suddenly realized they were all refugees." Movies nowadays are often the vision of one person, usually the director. But in many ways, Casablanca is a testament to what was best in the prolific studio system of the 1940s. The picture was the result of a large group of people, all working at the top of their game. Film historian Alan Rode describes the making of the movie as cinematic magic that occurred accidentally on purpose. Producer Hal Wallis, director Michael Curtiz, and 7 screenwriters, including Oscar winners Philip and Julius Epstein and Howard Koch, worked tirelessly, indeed often running new pages to the set during filming to get the script right. Poor Ingrid Bergman said later that she was unsure which actor she should look at lovingly in her close-ups because she wasn't sure whether she would end up with Rick or Laszlo. And there were logistical issues as well. For instance, the nighttime scene at the Casablanca airport would have been filmed on location in peacetime, probably at LA's Burbank Airport. But wartime restrictions on exterior lighting in Los Angeles made it impossible to film the sequence outdoors, except for 2 quick shots they managed to get of the plane's engines starting. Instead, the entire emotional scene was shot on a studio soundstage with artificial fog so we can't see too much through the open hangar door. And the production designer used tricks to add depth to the background. The plane you see waiting for Ilsa and Victor was a plywood cutout in reduced scale, and the ground crew working around the plane were little people hired as extras. And when the airplane takes off, that was a model on a tabletop set. Each new viewing of Casablanca over the years has strengthened my conviction that, in fact, Rick Blaine is wrong about what he says at the end of the movie. The problem of these 3 people, and many of the characters in the movie, do amount to a hill of beans. The qualities of bravery, sacrifice, friendship, and love remain even in the worst of circumstances, despite whatever craziness is happening in the world. And the right ending isn't always the happily ever after ending. Producer Hal Wallis said, "We started out to make a good picture. We never dreamed it would become a classic." I think you'll agree that they did, and it did. So now please sit back and enjoy the magic. From 1942, it's Casablanca.